All right, today we're jumping into the absolutely incredible story of Saint Agatha of Sicily. She was a young woman whose faith and courage, well, it made her one of the most revered figures in all of early Christianity. I mean, her story is all about unshakable faith when faced with absolute power. It's a tale that's been told for almost 1,800 years, and you can see why it's inspired so many people. So that really is the big question, isn't it? How does this happen? It gets right to the heart of what faith and resilience are all about, this epic clash between a massive worldly empire and a spiritual kingdom. So let's dive in and uncover her story. Okay, first things first, to really get Agatha's story, you have to understand the world she was living in. It was a time and place where her kind of devotion, well, it wasn't just seen as faith, it was seen as defiance. So Agatha was born into a pretty well-off, noble family, but the timing, not great. The emperor, a guy named Decius, he got it in his head that all the empire's problems were because people had stopped worshiping the old Roman gods. So he issues this deadly edict. Everybody, and I mean everybody, had to make a sacrifice to the gods. Now, for Christians, you can imagine, this wasn't just a loyalty test, it was a death sentence. And here's where Agatha's story really begins. At a young age, she makes this huge commitment. She dedicates her entire life, her body, her soul, everything, to Christ. Now, you have to remember, in Roman society, a noblewoman's job was basically to get married, secure alliances, have kids. So for her to do this, it wasn't just a personal choice. Oh no, it was a radical, a revolutionary act against the way her entire world worked. And of course, it's that very devotion that puts her on the radar of a very powerful and very ruthless man, the Roman governor of Sicily, a guy named Quintianus. Okay, so this is where you get this incredible clash of wills. On one hand, you have Quintianus. He looks at Agatha and sees everything he wants, her beauty, her family's money, plus a chance to look good by enforcing the emperor's rules. But Agatha? She'd already given all of that away. Her entire life belonged to God. So when she said no, it wasn't just no thank you. It was a fundamental challenge to his power, his authority, and the whole Roman world he stood for. So Quintinius has her arrested. He's probably thinking, okay, a little pressure and she'll fold. But her response? It's not what he expected at all. She doesn't beg for mercy. Instead, she prays for strength. And that prayer, well, it really sets the stage for the terrifying ordeal that was about to unfold. Quintianus tried threats, he tried proposals, nothing worked. So he just switches gears completely. He turns to a campaign of escalating cruelty, designed to do one thing: break her. Mind, body, and soul. And his first move is actually really sinister. It wasn't physical, not at first. He attacked her soul. He sends her to a brothel for a whole month. His thinking was that the constant humiliation, the psychological pressure, that it would completely shatter her vow of purity and just crush her will to resist. But it backfired, big time. It failed so spectacularly that the woman running the place, Aphrodisia, eventually just sent her back to the governor. The story goes that she told him it would be easier to soften stones than to change Agatha's mind. And for Quintianus, this complete and utter failure, it just made him even more furious. So, with his psychological games totally defeated, Quintianus just unleashes pure, unimaginable physical violence. She was stretched on the rack, torn with hooks, burned with torches, and then, in this just horrifying act of sadistic cruelty, he ordered her breasts to be cut off and then just threw her in a dark dungeon to die. But even after all of that, an unimaginable agony, her spirit just wasn't broken. This was her response to him. Can you imagine? A powerful, defiant rebuke that completely condemned his inhumanity, basically turning his act of shame right back on him. So there she is, left to bleed to death in a prison cell. And this is where the story takes a miraculous turn. This is the moment it stops being a story about human cruelty and becomes a story about divine intervention. Just try to picture it. She's alone in a pitch-black cell in agonizing pain. And then suddenly, the whole room is filled with this brilliant, dazzling light. A light so bright it apparently terrified the guards outside. And this right here, this is the heart of the miracle. The tradition says that St. Peter the Apostle himself appeared to her, sent by Christ. He comforts her, and then, miraculously, her terrible wounds are completely healed. Her body is restored. You'd think this would be the moment Quintianus has a change of heart, right? Wrong. 4 days later, he calls for her, sees that she's perfectly healed, and instead of mercy, he's just enraged. He absolutely refuses to believe it's a miracle. He calls it magic and orders one last, final, brutal torment. But as they start this final torture, it's like the earth itself had had enough. A massive earthquake shakes the whole city. Part of the governor's own palace actually collapses, killing 2 of his men. And the people of Catania, they were terrified. They saw it as a clear sign from God, and they started demanding that the torture be stopped immediately. So now Quintianus is worried about a full-blown riot on his hands. He has Agatha sent back to her cell. Her terrible ordeal was finally over. But her story? Oh, her story was really just beginning. Back in the quiet of her cell, after everything she had endured, victorious in spirit, Agatha offered one final prayer, and then she peacefully commended her soul to God. Her death might have brought her peace, but her story wasn't over, not by a long shot. In fact, her real power, her role as the protector of her city, was about to be revealed just 1 year later. So Mount Etna, that huge volcano that's always looming over Catania, it erupts violently. A river of lava starts flowing right towards the city, and the people, totally terrified, Christians and pagans alike, they all rush to her tomb. They grab the veil that had covered her body, and they hold it up against the flow of lava. And incredibly, the lava stops. It just stops. The city was saved. And from that day on, she became the beloved protector of Catania. Her patronage has grown over the centuries, too. She's now the patron saint for people who suffer from fires, earthquakes, and breast cancer. She's seen as a source of strength for rape victims, for nurses, even for bell founders, which is kind of an interesting one. And get this, her name is one of only 7 women mentioned in the Roman canon, the central prayer of the Catholic Mass. That's a huge deal. It's a story that's almost 2,000 years old, but it really makes you think about conviction, doesn't it? It kind of makes you ask yourself, where do we find the strength to stand up for what we believe in, especially when the price for doing so is unbelievably high? So if you found this explainer helpful, inspiring, or even just plain entertaining and informative, please go ahead and share it, give it a like, and be sure to subscribe. Keep an eye out for the next upload. Thanks for watching.